Just be very careful. Everything's an artifact. So welcome to the parlor. This is a special occasion room. Probably this would not have been used every day. It would have been closed off unless special guests were here. So welcome, you are special guests. You're probably noticing a lot. There's a lot to look at in here, a lot to see all at once. One of the first things that people ask about is the wallpaper. If you look around, this is called the Monuments of Paris wallpaper. It's hung in panels and they don't repeat. So all of these were silk screened and they're representing all the different monuments in Paris. It's not geographically correct, just so you know. But it is very, very beautiful and it tells us a little bit about the time. And this wallpaper is reproduction, but it is based on papers that were advertised in Virginia newspapers at that time. So it's very likely that the Cabell family who lived here had wallpaper like this. But if you look, you'll see this clothing style. This is very much like that early 1800 style of dress, the Regency era, kind of like the Jane Austen novels. That's what it would have looked like. Another thing you might notice when you look around is this gorgeous mirror. One of my colleagues calls it the disco ball of its day. You notice it's convex, so it kind of curves out. And that's because it's not really supposed to represent a true and accurate reflection of us. It's actually meant to bounce light around the room. If you think about it, in the early 1800s, there was no electricity, no gas lighting either. So they had daylight, candlelight, moonlight, and firelight. And this, something like this with the gold and the crystals, it would have illuminated everything. It would have bounced light around the room like a disco ball. So very special. And then you'll notice a lot of the decor is also gold and shiny, and on the chairs you see that same gold tint. All of that was to reflect light, to help illuminate the room. Another thing you might notice is this gorgeous wedding dress. We know that a wedding took place in this room in 1837, October 31st. A woman named Elvira Daniel got married in this room, and that is the dress that she wore. So we're about to put this dress back in storage. It's been out for a while, so I'm glad you're getting to see it in the room where it was used. But the Daniel family inherited this property after the Cabell family built it and lived here. And originally this plantation was about 800 acres. So that included land that was on islands in the James River. But if you know Lynchburg at all, the plantation stretched all the way to Randolph College. It was huge. And now it's about 4 acres, so just to give you an idea.
Why was it called Point of Honor?
So there are a couple of stories, like all good stories, there are a couple of versions of it. One is people connect it to the practice of dueling. So dueling, like with swords or pistols, was illegal in the city of Lynchburg. And at that time, Point of Honor was outside of the city limits. It was considered part of Campbell County. And so the story goes, men would come to the point to defend their honor, and so Point of Honor. But then other people say it's just about the geography, because the property literally comes to a point between the James River and the Blackwater Creek. It kind of comes to a natural point. But we do know that this house was being called Point of Honor by 1817, so the name happened very early, and it has stayed with the house for 200 years. So, yeah. Any other questions about this room or about the Cabell family? Dr. Cabell was a physician. He was actually Patrick Henry's physician, but he also grew tobacco, and that's really how he made his money. And that's why he needed all that acreage, because tobacco is really hard on the land, some of you may know. It strips the land of nutrients, and so you have to rotate crops and move them around.
Did he have children?
He did. when he built this house, or when he had the house built, he had adult children who had married and established their own homes, but he also had some younger children who lived in this house, including Marion Cabell was the youngest, and I think she was around 9 when they moved in. She was known to be very musical, and so she probably actually played this pianoforte because this belonged not to George Cabell, but his brother John, who lived not far away. So I imagine that when she visited her uncle, she probably played this pianoforte. That's the only piece like that we have that has that Cabell connection. But they also had a son named William Lewis, and he's the one who inherited this property. So yeah, he even though he was the youngest son, he got point of honor after Dr. Cabell died. So, well, we're going to move into the next space. So if you'll follow me, paint layers to find the original colors. And so as much as possible, we've tried to do that. And that's one reason why we think this wallpaper was a good candidate in here, because it matches so beautifully. But yeah, as much as possible. And you'll know this is sort of a traditional color from that era as well. You would have had to eat somewhere else, but that's okay, because you know what? If you had to sit at this table, you would have to sit for a long time. Because dinner took hours. You'd have to sit still in your best dress and be on your best behavior for hours and hours and hours. So you were probably glad that you got to eat somewhere else, because this was really fancy, and it was really as much about talking as it was about eating. Yes, there was food here, and it was good food, but mostly people were sitting around this table so they could talk to each other, so they could share stories, so they could talk about, what can my family do for you? What can we, what can we work out? Who's going to be engaged? Can we work this family connection? Because that made the community even stronger. So if you were sitting around this table, dinner might start at 3, it might end at 9 o'clock. And there would be multiple courses that happened. And in between courses, enslaved members of the community would come in and they would clear the table, they would put fresh things out and new courses of food. And the ladies of the house would probably stand up and they'd either walk to the parlor, or they might walk outside and talk to each other alone without the men around. And the men might stay in here and sit cordial or something like that, talk politics. But this room, yes, people would eat in here, but it was mostly about generosity and hospitality. It was also a little bit about showing off, because there's a lot of fancy stuff in here, and a lot of beautiful pieces that were very expensive. And of course the food itself all came from point of honor, except for a few things that would have been imported, and those would be very, very expensive and dear, but shared with guests as a show of hospitality. But if point of honor was doing well, and you'd have a lot of nice things on the table, even in winter, because you could preserve it, you'd have such an abundance, you could preserve it and have it in winter too. So, forgive me if I already said this, but a plantation is kind of like a little tiny city. It's very self-sufficient, and so all of that, as much as possible, would be sourced from here. But things like sugar and rum and some special things like that would be imported. They would be brought by bateau up the James River, and so they traveled a long way. It was a big ordeal. And when you look around here, you'll see things like that were so expensive would be locked away in cabinets. And when you look at the furniture, you see a lot of it has locks on it. And so when dinner was over, the lady of the house would stay, everybody else would go. And then members of the enslaved community would come in and they would clean everything right here. Nothing left this room. So you didn't gather up the plates and take them somewhere else to wash. They would bring in tubs of water, clean everything, dry it, stack it, and then the lady of the house would count it, and it would be put away and locked, everything accounted for. Any questions? There are a couple of things I want to point out to you.
Where's the restroom if they, they're here for hours and hours and hours?
Yeah. Well, probably there were outhouses, and
Right.
if there was a little light, they could go outside. But there were also chamber pots and necessary chairs and things like that in other rooms, not in this one. But yes, ma'am.
Is that real?
It's not. It's not. It's fake food, and I'll let you touch this one, and you can let her touch it too. So it's a baked potato. Yeah, we have this out to kind of show what a holiday meal would look like. And you see, it's pretty simple. It's not fancy casseroles. It's pretty simple food, but to them it would have been pretty special.
Did they harvest the oysters right here on the James?
No, I think that would have been one of the things that was imported.
Just,
So, yeah.
So since it came to a point at the river, so the ferry system come right up to this home because it was so prominent?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think there must have been a landing. That would have made a lot of sense because getting to Lynchburg took a long time. There was no bridge at that point. There was like a place you could ford in Collins Mill area where you could take a horse over. But it makes sense to me that people could arrive by boat because that would have been a little bit simpler
Right.
before the bridges came in.
Right, for the bridges and the railroad.
Oil lamps?
Yes. I think they're called argan lamps, and the oil, again, probably some whale oil would have been used in it, and it would illuminate the same as 6 candles. So kind of special. Before we leave this room, I want to show you, this is a portrait of Judge William Daniel Sr. He inherited this land from his daughter, and she married the Cabell. So that's how the land passed to him. So we're going to move into the next space. So if you'll follow me, and there's another group trying to come in, so I'm going to leave. This is kind of an interesting room. It's definitely where the Cabells would have slept, so it's a bedroom, but it's a lot more than that too. You probably have a room in your house or your apartment or whatever where everybody kind of hangs out all the time and everything happens. That was this room. So yes, they slept here, but also probably this is where the family ate a lot of the time when guests weren't here, and the children probably always ate in here. This is just a little more relaxed, a little more comfortable, and actually this door, let me speak past you real quick, I'll show you. This door leads straight outside, and it's very close to the hearth kitchen. Have you guys visited the hearth kitchen yet today? Okay. If you haven't, please do check it out because we've got some really special things happening in there. But this door leads almost directly there. So Mrs. Cabell could open this door, look, see what was going on in the kitchen, communicate with slave members of the community, and they could bring food in here, and it was just a lot easier than trekking into the dining room. But probably this room was used for other things too. You saw the chamber pot. There are also 2 other restroom situations in this room, kind of hidden in plain sight. And that's these chairs. They look very fancy, but if you were to lift up the cushions, they have holes underneath so you can put a chamber pot.
No way.
Yeah, afraid so.
The original throne.
Afraid so. Yeah.
Wait, this is?
I can't let you right now. I don't have my gloves on. I can't touch it. But I will say, you know, if it was during the day and you needed to go, you'd probably just go outside. But if it was the middle of the night, you would not do that because it was too dark and you'd probably wake up the whole house. So this was really, you needed something, you know, and this would have been a little more comfortable if you were older or something like that.
I would never suspect that.
I know, it's shocking. But other things happened in this room too. Probably a lot of teaching happened in this room. Young boys and girls were taught how to read, write, and do math. Everybody needed to know how to do that. So they would have tutors, and then sometimes the boys would be sent off to school, either a day school in town or a boarding school. A lot of times girls would either continue with a tutor or their mothers would teach them everything they needed to know. Sewing, needlework, and how to run a household, because the hope was that they would marry and then have their own estate and be able to run that. So that knowledge would get passed down. Any questions about anything you see in this room?
So the wood for the fireplace, they would keep the wood, would they keep any of it in here, or would it be?
Probably not. It probably enslaved members would just come in and keep track of the fire, feed the fire, come in through this door. Maybe a few pieces would be stacked close by, but there was so much going on in this
Yeah.
room, you couldn't store it.
Right.
Is that the regular size bed? I mean, is that for
It's
one
from
person
that
or for
era.
two?
It's for two, it's pretty small.
So they didn't have separate bedrooms like you see in a lot of.
Not in this space. You know, there's symmetry in this house. So there's a room on the second floor of the children's room that's the same size. So if they were gonna add they would add another bed to this room if they were gonna do that, but, as far as we know. You had a question?
Yeah, does that have like Lynchburg history to it?
It does, that's a sampler, and it was done by a young woman who lived in Lynchburg. She didn't live here in Honor, but she lived in Lynchburg, and we think she was a Quaker. We have some reasons for that, and she was 13 when she did that.
Oh, wow.
So the sampler was kind of a fun, some people talk about it like it's a final exam for a young girl, but I think of it more as a rite of passage. You know, she already knew she already knew her alphabet, she knew all that stuff. She didn't have to prove that, but the sampler was done right around that age, 12 or 13, where she's hitting puberty, and she's starting to think about her own household. And she wouldn't necessarily marry at 13, but she would maybe even already be engaged or promised or something like that. So it's just kind of a signal that she's coming into womanhood. So a really special piece there. I will also say this door, it leads up to a set of stairs. So this is the back stairway. The enslaved would have used this staircase, the family. It leads up to the children's bedroom. And Dr. Cabell was kind of a clever man because they are very slippery and steep. But he had this added later. So originally it wasn't there, but he figured out if he put this in, he could close this door, close that door up there, and then it was like a little mini apartment or townhouse. And 1/3 of the house, and the whole family could live in it, and the rest could be, kept for company. And so you'd save on wood, you'd save on cleaning and all those resources and stuff. So pretty smart, pretty clever person.
So the family used that too?
Yeah, the
You
family
get a nice
used that.
draft. When you open the door, it felt good. Yeah.
Yeah, so, and, you see this is the front of the house, that's the back. You would also get drafts that way if you have the windows open. Very important then. Any questions before we leave the house? I'm so glad you guys could join us. What I'm gonna do is guide you out this door, and if you haven't visited the Hearth Kitchen, please do. And I do have a couple things to share with you as you exit.